A new starter on the Missouri defense? Let's talk about that and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, I want to talk about, contextualizing a lot of this fall camp information, reasons why we can't overreact to anything we're hearing right now. Plus, Mark Mitchell reportedly making big strides on his jump shot. If that's true, that's huge news for the Missouri basketball team this winter. Before I start the show, I want to remind you today's program is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. Something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And I want to start today's program by talking about Marquise Gracial, who was a big-time recruit coming out of high school, based mainly, quite honestly, on being an athletic big man, which is just something you can't get enough of at any program. And frankly, the SEC tends to stockpile more of those guys, especially on the defensive line, than anywhere. But of course, sometimes it takes those athletic big guys, it's going to take them time to figure out actual football technique and knowledge and all that good stuff. And at this point, that seems to be happening for Marquise Gracial. It almost seems like, as somebody who's been doing a daily Missouri podcast for a long time here, it's surprising to me that Marquise Gracial listed as a true sophomore. It seems like he's been around a lot longer than that. But at 6'4", 323 pounds, and again, pretty athletic for that size too. Not a huge surprise that his upside, maybe coming to fruition here. The word is he was taking not some, but all of the first team reps next to Christian Williams. And I thought that was interesting for a number of reasons. Well, for one, Chris McClellan, a guy who had been getting most of the first team reps so far. I've heard good things about McClellan actually from Florida people, a Florida transfer, the former Florida Gator, of course. So I do wonder a little bit if this is maybe a thing of, hey, maybe Gracial is a little bit more of a three technique. I think Chris Jones a little bit more of a pass rusher from the inside, as opposed to Christian Williams more of a nose or a one technique for the most part. So I wonder if it's more of a, hey, who do we want in at the same time? Maybe Williams and McClellan, they feel like their skill sets are overlapping a little bit there. That could be part of it, but either way, I actually think Gracial getting his way into the starting lineup, at least getting a ton of reps here in practice, that's got to be a good sign. Again, one of the more talented, big-bodied defensive linemen that Missouri signed in recent years, the fact that he's starting to climb up the depth chart here, well, I'm definitely taking that as a positive, similar to how Toriano Pride and Nick DeLoach are still competing for that number one corner spot across from Drayden Norwood on the opposite side of the field. Now, on injury front, some good news for the Tigers, both their tight ends, Brett Norfleet and Jordan Harris, who had been out for a few practices, both back in limited capacity. Both were wearing non-contact jerseys, but to Eli Drinkwitz's point a few days ago, he was saying both expected to be ready for week one against Murray State. And one thing that was interesting, of course, today, if you follow the Mizzou beat really closely, you'll know that for the first time all year, Eli Drinkwitz allowed the media to watch all of practice. So we got a little bit closer of a look, more information than usual. And one thing that's come out is that the defense had a better day than the offense today. At least that's what Gabe DeArmond said for sure. Now, frankly, I hope that's the case. I really do. That is encouraging because I think most of us are pretty darn sure the Missouri offense is going to be good. So if the defense can be close to the level of the Missouri offense. Just like last year, the Tigers should have a really good team. But I will say, anytime you hear reports like this, you got to be really careful, because I'm not questioning anybody's analysis of today, but you do have to put all of this stuff in context. Of course, number one, the obvious is, hey, small sample size. This may have been the one day out of 10 that the defense maybe got the better of the offense. Again, that's just for example. But really what's even a little bit, you go a little bit farther into game theory, I guess, you got to ask yourself, what were both units trying to accomplish today? Because, again, for example, just hypothetically here, you never know. Maybe the defense was saying, hey, we're just going to play it exactly how we would play it if this were a regular season game, and we're going to throw basically our A game out there in terms of scheme and play calling and that type of stuff. Whereas the offense, even though they had their number one players out there, again, for a unit that knows what it is more than this Missouri defense does right now for a whole bunch of different reasons, you got to wonder what the offense was trying to accomplish. Were they actually running their best plays? Or were they trying something out? Were they experimenting? Were they looking at different things? Again, that's very hard for observers, especially just off of one practice, to figure out. I'm just saying there's a million different variables here that could lead to, hey, the defense having a slightly better day than the offense, that type of deal. Again, I hope it's true. I really do. I hope the defense really has been throughout camp giving it to the offense as much as they've been getting it, because if so, that's a really good sign for the Tigers in 2024. And in other fall camp fodder, well, the true freshman running back Kewan Lacey back in practice in a limited capacity as well. Certainly you don't want to hear soft tissue injury at any point during the season, especially for a skill position player. We'll just have to keep an eye on Lacey, and obviously the Tigers will be careful with him for sure, especially considering at this point he's probably 4th, 5th on the depth chart at best by all indications. But a really talented guy. You'd like to see him at least maybe get a few snaps in this September period where he could easily still maintain that redshirt freshman status for next season. Another true freshman that's looking like a serious contender for playing time is actually Mizzou legacy Whit Hafer. Yes, of course, the son of Jeff Hafer, former Mizzou basketball player, Joplin, Missouri native, are both a father and son. And Whit Hafer, it sounds like, is basically in on every single place-kicking, blocking situation, perhaps on the punt unit as well. But I definitely saw that Hafer was in on the special teams units blocking for place kicks on just about every snap that was observed in practice. So that's a pretty good indication that he's going to be shedding his red shirt this year. I'd seen some speculation that, hey, perhaps Hafer will eventually beef up and become an offensive lineman. We'll just have to see. I'm not so sure about that, because Hafer has gotten some action with Norfleet and Harris out of practice the last few days or so. Well, he, along with another true freshman from the state of Florida, Jude James, getting some action there at tight end. So you never know. We could see some of those guys work their way in September in offense as well. Again, though, this is definitely Brett Norfleet's job. You just want to make sure he gets through the season healthy. So, hey, maybe managing his load a little bit, coming off a minor injury here in fall camp, makes some sense to start the season. And coming up on the program, more football talk, of course, including what's up with the very little amount of Brady Cook talk we've had this offseason. Plus, on the basketball side, some interesting insight from the team I thought was put out recently, including that apparently Mark Mitchell's shot is just straight butter now, according to Trent Burns. So we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. First, though, let's talk about FanDuel. And as you know, I love sports, of course, and I love them so much I never want them to stop. But before football kicks off, I should say, we just don't get quite as many games. But You know what? FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. To me, my favorite bet still remains as far as futures go. You want some value on the Tigers, take them plus 180, to make the college football playoff. And, of course, plenty of Major League Baseball to bet on each and every night, including the Cardinals against the Dodgers tonight. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. It's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen of the day. For your second listen, if you like this format, you have to check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, the NIL, the portal, the expanded playoffs, the whole thing. It is Locked On College Football, available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. And I have to say, I kind of enjoy this new technique where teams set up a camera at the end of practice. Missouri does this for football and basketball quite a bit. They'll just set up a camera and there'll be a poster board or something with a question on it. And at the end of Missouri hoops practice the other day, well, Peyton Marshall, you know, my favorite guy in the world right now on the Missouri basketball team anyway, Peyton Marshall, no stranger to the camera, not exactly a wallflower. He is a bit of a ham, quite honestly. He's got a big personality, along with a big body and a lot of talent as well. But when asked who is the most improved player on Missouri right now, well, Marshall said Trent Burns, basically the only guy on the team who's taller than Peyton Marshall, significantly, by the way. The nearly 7'3", approximately 7'3" Trent Burns came in as a skinny guy, more of a three-point shooter in a lot of ways. But according to Marshall, he's going, hey, this guy is getting physical all of a sudden. Well, Marquez Warwick, another newcomer for the Tigers, a veteran newcomer, said it was all the big men, really, including Peyton Marshall, Trent Burns, and Josh Gray, the transfer from South Carolina as well. But it was Trent Burns, who, again, Peyton Marshall said was the most improved guy on the team. He had the most interesting comment of all, in my opinion. And I really don't want to overanalyze this, but this is something I've been looking for all off season, because Mark Mitchell, the transfer from Duke, no doubt the prize of Missouri's transfer portal class in basketball this past off season. Well, from what I've seen from Mitchell's game, his first 2 seasons of college basketball, is that he's got it all, basically, except a consistent jump shot. Now, you look at the numbers for Mitchell, and it's not ghastly or anything, but quite frankly, when you watched him shoot a free throw at Duke, it was tough to watch. His mechanics were just all over the place. And now you watch him shoot at Missouri, and frankly, it does look much, much better. I'd still like to see Mitchell get his elbow in and straight up and down a little bit more. But compared to what it was at Duke, it looks like just a much more fluid stroke and a natural stroke for Mitchell right now. And since Dennis Gates and his staff, well, they have a pretty good history of improving guys' three-point shooting dramatically, from Sean East this past season to Kobe Brown and Demoy Hodge previously. This is not outside the realm of possibility that Mark Mitchell could suddenly, if he improves his jump shot significantly, he's going to be a much, much harder player to defend offensively. And with his size, with his athleticism, and just overall skill level, man, that's a heck of a thing, because on defense, too, he's got a chance to really be a menace defensively. He's got tons of upside on the other end of the court as well. So to me, Mitchell's shot, that was really one of the only things I was kind of worried about with him. If he's truly made strides, and there's no reason to think Burns is lying here or anything like that. Again, I think these hoops videos here, these man on the street videos, whatever you want to call them, it catches them at an honest moment. It's a little bit different than, standing in front of a lectern with microphones and a bunch of guys waiting to ask you questions you've never met before. Instead, you're just kind of palling around with your buddies and just answering something off the top of your head. I think you do get some pretty honest answers here. So not only Trent Burns looks like he's improving, probably more important for this year, Mark Mitchell's shot, a big improvement. He said it's butter now. He said Mark is butter now. That was the quote. I love hearing that. I really do. And in case for the uninitiated here, butter in this context is a very good thing. And by the way, it would be a good thing if Burns could be a player as well. Having a 7'3" guy who can also knock down a shot and apparently is getting more physical on the inside already as a true freshman. I think the word on the street has been that Burns was probably going to be a likely redshirt candidate this year. I'm not so sure about that anymore. Frankly, I was always a little bit skeptical of it because, generally speaking, basketball players don't redshirt a whole heck of a lot. So, to me, at this point, if I had a bet, if it was an even money bet over at FanDuel or something like that, I think Trent Burns is going to play this season and shed that red shirt. And as I speak here, we are indeed 13 days, believe it or not, from kickoff. Missouri against Murray State, of course, at 7 o'clock on the 29th. Hey, a drone show at halftime, by the way. That sounds like that could possibly be fun. But what I really have been hearkening back to, thinking about Murray State, whenever I hear about Murray State, I think about, well, the only game I actually ever covered for the Columbia Daily Tribune just so happened to be Chase Daniel's very first start as a Missouri Tiger, as a college football player. September 2nd, 2006 against the Racers, a 47-7 victory for the Tigers that frankly didn't even feel remotely that close. The Tigers threw for a bajillion yards in the first half. Daniel was basically perfection, and in classic Gary Pinkel fashion, in the fourth quarter and in second half, he did everything he could to not score 50 points on Murray State and run up the score. That was Pinkel's MO for sure. But what it made me think of is that, of course, that start all off season, of course, the talk was, hey, Chase Daniel seems like a heck of a quarterback. One as a backup, came in when Brad Smith got concussed against Iowa State in 2005, but it never started a game. But we had high hopes for Daniel. So all the talk was, how good will Chase Daniel be? Well, of course, there was tons of talk about Brady Cook this previous offseason. Would he start? How good is he? All of that stuff. Well, now there's no talk of Brady Cook practically this offseason. Basically, the only thing I've said about Brady is, hey, I'd like to see him improve the intermediate passing a little bit. But just the fact that, again, Missouri with Cook as a starter, the fact that there are no questions right now, pretty ironic versus last season, because it is weird when you're actually a guy who is entrenched. Oddly enough, we don't talk about you nearly as much as when you have a question mark. Just a little bit of irony there, in my opinion. If the Missouri defense is going to be as good as we hope this season, it's pretty clear to me that one part of that defense is much more important than the other. Is it the run? Is it the pass? I've got an obvious answer here, at least in my mind, coming up here in just a little bit. First, though, let's talk about Gametime, because if you're looking for last-minute tickets to Major League Baseball, Gametime is absolutely the place for you. And it's a great time, of course, as always, to get to a Major League game before school starts. In fact, tomorrow at Busch Stadium, the Cardinals taking on the Dodgers, and it is Scott Rowland bobblehead night. Come on, that's a great reason to get out to the ballpark. You guys know I'm more of a Royals guy, but I also grew up playing third base in Little League, so I always loved me some Scott Rowland without question. But you know what you got to do if you want that bobble? You got to take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. When it comes to defense, talking about pass defense versus run defense, if I just had to pick one that Missouri was elite or above average at this season, there's no question it would be pass defense to me because, number one, when you just look at the structure of the Missouri defense the past couple seasons, there really aren't a lot of moments when the Tigers were dominated by a rushing attack or really hurt by a rushing attack all that much. In fact, I would argue you have to go at least all the way back to 2022, probably against Kansas State, when frankly Kansas State unfortunately just did whatever it wanted to at a certain point against that Missouri defense. Now, obviously the Tigers got a heck of a lot better for the most part that season in just about every way defensively. Now, I will say, in that 2022 Georgia game, fourth quarter, well, the Dogs kind of started to wear down Missouri with the ground game and really put the game away with that rushing attack. Other than that, though, when the Missouri defense has really been hurt, again in 2022 against Tennessee, when they had a bunch of NFL caliber, at least pretty close receivers, three really good college receivers at the very least, well, they were able to match up with some Missouri safeties that couldn't quite handle the matchup in that specific case. But again, in 2023, more to my point, I just don't remember a moment where it felt like the Missouri rushing defense was getting gashed to the point where, oh no, this is why we're going to lose the game. Now, on the other hand, though, against LSU, Jaden Daniels, yes, the scrambling ability of Daniels, when I'm talking rushing, I'm talking more, traditional, just turn around, hand it off, that type of thing. But obviously, Jaden Daniels' arm, those excellent receivers, including Malik Neighbors now with the New York Giants, that really hurt Missouri as much as anything. So if you're going to tell me that, again, if those corners can be anywhere up to snuff compared to Ennis Rakestraw and Chris Abrams-Drain, if just the pass defense in general, the pass rush, the linebackers, everything in between, if that can all be anywhere close to what last season was, well, I'm not really that worried about Missouri getting gashed in the rushing attack. Again, it just doesn't really seem to happen as much anymore. This isn't 1995 Nebraska. They aren't walking through the tunnel anytime soon. And one final recruiting note here that shouldn't be a huge surprise to anybody who follows recruiting closely, but one of the biggest names still technically out there on the market for Missouri was Iose Epenesa from Edwardsville, Illinois, an edge rusher. In fact, the top-ranked edge rusher, at least according to ESPN and some other outlets as well. The thing is, he committed to Iowa, which is not a huge surprise considering, well, his dad went to Iowa. I think people had assumed that Iowa was the leader for a long time, but Missouri did get him on campus for an official visit, so I had a lot of viewers and listeners who were curious about Epenesa. Well, we can take him off the board at this point. Obviously, nothing is official yet, as Javen Boggs has taught a couple schools the last few months. But I think with Epenesa, again, being an Iowa legacy kid, that type of deal, it'd be pretty stunning if he were to decommit at this point from Iowa. So, unfortunately, he's off the board. Andrew Babalola, the offensive lineman from Kansas City, Kansas, he's still out on the board as well. Again, technically for Missouri, I'm not hearing anybody who thinks that Missouri is the leader in the clubhouse at this point. But in terms of top 100 type players in 2025, he's also the biggest name out there. And honestly, in terms of 2026, I wouldn't be shocked if Michael Clayton II, a guy who is clearly Missouri's number one target at quarterback for the 26 class at the moment, I wouldn't be surprised if he were actually to commit before some of these final 2025 guys. That's the new world order of the quarterback market these days. They seem to be committing earlier and earlier. Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years you hear about a quarterback commit who commits during his junior year, maybe before his junior year of high school, and says, the heck with it, I'm skipping my senior year of high school football, much like, Jamar Chase did during the COVID year, decided to skip his final year of college football, and not unlike guys who are skipping bowl games these days. I'm telling you, It's going to happen. If these guys are committing earlier and earlier and earlier, they're going to start skipping high school football their senior years at a certain point. Somebody's going to do it. I'm not saying it's going to become incredibly common, but mark my words, somebody's going to go out there and do it. Well, anyway, with that prediction out of the way, I'm going to head out here on Locked On Mizzou and enjoy my Friday evening. Hopefully you are as well. Cannot wait for football. Just 2 weeks out. Going to have one more episode for you this weekend, so look for that right here on Locked On Mizzou.